So the project is going to be changing out this chair pad because it has kind of become crushed over time. Originally there was a silk cover on there, but I knew for the kitchen table I took some of the dining room chairs and took them to an upholsterer, and they put the vinyl on there so it would hold up to a young kid slopping stuff on there. So about 3 or 4 of these chairs like this. The rest still have the silk. But I don't know, they did a good job, the upholstery, but I don't think they used a very high quality foam. But I don't know, you read different things, foam only lasts 3 or 4 years or something like that if you repetitive use. So my chair is a little different because it's got a little inset, a little lip, a rabbet in there where this has to sit down in there. So what I'm going to use for this materials are, this is ultra density high foam, whatever. You can order it online. This is some dust cover backing I got from Joann's Fabrics. This is some foam from Joann's Fabrics. Not quite as high quality, but just as expensive, I think. But some of the other things, I got the covers too for the, yeah, I've got some cover over here. Here's some of the tools I'm going to use, but here's the vinyl. Again, I went to the Joann Fabrics and got some of this vinyl to put on the chair. Couldn't get the same color, so, you know, it's okay. So, you know, most useful thing in this whole deal is this pry bar. It's got a little thin edge on there to get up under the staples, because the staples are the toughest part removing. And then I just used it, once I got it, I grabbed the staple once I pried it up a little bit. Staple remover for like paper does not work. Also, you need a stapler like this. I had the hammer kind where you hit it really hard. It doesn't work because the foam gives straight edge, draw some lines, that kind of stuff. I used more tools than this. I actually used my bandsaw to cut the foam. It cuts quite well. You could do it with scissors too. They say use a serrated scissors or like a bread scissors or something, or a serrated knife. I have really long scissors, like super long, that can be used too. You can see some of the pieces that are cut over here, just done. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show you how the toughest part, getting rid of removing the staples. So I've got this up on the workbench because I'm going to remove, there's 4 screws, I think that's kind of standard, that are holding the wood frame down. There's netting in between there. You can almost see through the dust cover, the webbing with a hole cut out in the center, and then the plywood around it. But there's 4 of these that hold it down, and I'm going to replace those holes with wood dowel, glue it in so I can screw back into, I don't want to screw in the same hole that's maybe already ripped out. Again, this doesn't have to be super strong though, because your weight is pushing down. You're not pulling away from this screw. So, you know, it doesn't have to hold the greatest in the world, but that's just me. I like to, when I take out a screw of wood and I'm going to screw back into it, I'm going to put a plug in there, wood plug in there, and I'll show you how I did that later. So on my other chairs, in order to get this out, I had to use a pry bar, get up under there. I used a little piece of paper here on the frame, paper on the frame down here so I didn't scratch the frame. Got the pry bar, and this one I was able to actually just pull off with my hands. You can see one of the screws were a little, didn't want to drop out of there. Still 2 in the front. When I unscrewed them, there's the bottom. Now the tough part, getting the staples out. This is just the dust cover staples. There's a bunch more staples underneath for the vinyl. We'll do that in a minute as soon as I get these last 2 screws out to save and redo. So to get these staples out, I don't recommend trying to pry every one out. I mean, I had a sharpened screwdriver I started with that I ground down, but that didn't work very well. I recommend just taking this and pulling it all off. Same thing with the leather, and then getting the staples. So then you're down to wood at that part. Once you get down under here, then you can actually drive your pry bar into the wood and get up under it. You can actually depress the wood a little bit. Right now it's too hard. When you try to do it with leather, which believe me I did, you spend a couple hours trying to get all these staples out. Still probably going to take at least an hour or more. But rip all this material off first, and then rip all the leather off, and then start removing the staples. Yeah, you'll have to replace it. And if you're trying to save your vinyl or leather upholstery and redo it, then yeah, then plan on 2 or 3 hours at least getting each staple out. It's doable that way. And I know online somebody used a awl. That's just a sharp pointed awl, but you know, I started doing that. I was ripping up my wall. I didn't want to ruin it. After just 1 or 2 staples, I figured right away. I went and got this pry bar and got the corner up under the staple, and then just tap the end of it. Actually using the pliers instead of a hammer to tap the end there to get it, dig up under the staple, and then prop it up a little enough to grab it with the pliers. I'll show you that in a minute. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to remove, you can see they have this webbing. You got to remember which side is top and bottom. This bottom webbing goes up, you know, top, keep it from ripping out when you're sitting on it. So to get this off, again, I'm not trying to save this piece. It's not worth it. Not enough hours in your life already. So you pretty much, I take it and I'm rotating it and tearing it up and just pulling out a little bit at a time. Then we'll go after the staples a little bit at a time. But if you try to remove the staples while they're still in this vinyl, getting up under that edge is really tough. So it's better off just rip them. Then you can grab the pry bar and compress the wood to get up under there. Kind of, I'll show you that too in a minute. See if I can get one loose here where I can show you. Let's see. I don't know, you probably can't see in there good enough, but get that under there, and I didn't even have to use the hammer or the, just take tap, tap, tap with the corner in there, pop that staple up there, and then you can grab it, take it out, and that's about how big they are. And I usually just put them all in my palm once I start going around, but I'm gonna get the vinyl off there first. Okay, so I grabbed the vinyl and ripped it all off everywhere first because it's too hard to get up under there without it. And you can just take the edge of this tool and get the corner up under the staple, tap it a little bit. Just get it up enough to kind of be able to grab it here. And you can grab it, kind of roll the pliers there, get rid of it. Another one. Clamp it a little bit better. Grab it, roll it, and you got it out. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use a Forstner bit here because it gets a little cleaner hole than a regular drill bit, but you could use if you don't have a Forstner bit, you could use a regular bit. And I'm going to re-drill out these holes where the screws, the 4 screws on the corners were for the bottom of the seat. And I'm going to replace that, plug it with some wood dowel. I just found the right, Forstner bit for this piece of wood dowel that I have. Doesn't matter the size as long as it's just a little bit bigger than the screw hole. So I'm going to drill this out and I'm going to cut out some little short pieces, wood dowels, and glue it in there. So I have some solid base to screw into on the bottom of the chair. This joint on the chair is not like, it doesn't have to be super strong because you're not really pulling away. You're actually sitting down on the chair and it's screwed from below. And so you're not really yanking up on it or anything where it has to be real strong. But I just don't like going into the same screw holes like when you replace hinges on a cabinet or something. You want to, drill it out and replug it with a new piece of wood, glue it back in there. So on my bandsaw where I cut these pieces off, but you can cut it with anything. I set up, because I knew I was doing 3 chairs and I had to do a lot of them, I set up a little distance there where I can measure it and mark it each one and cut it off. I'm making them long, of course, because then I'm going to cut them off afterwards with a Japanese saw. But I'll show that in a minute. For gluing the plugs here, all I'm doing is taking make sure it fit first in the hole there. And I'm just taking a little bit of glue here and coating it. Oh, see, got a hole in my glove. Getting it coated in glue pretty good. On the sides, a little brush. I'm going to take a little bit of glue, put it through the center. Got plastic underneath this so it doesn't get on my workbench. Yeah, normally you clamp things when they glue, but there's no really way to clamp this. The bond is to the sides of the cylinder, so it's squeezing in from the sides. You can't really clamp that in. Clamping up and down is not going to do anything. We'll wipe off the excess for a little bit later. But so 3 more of these. Just I put them in ahead of time, just be sure they fit, and go ahead and glue them up. Let them dry a decent time. It's kind of cool in my workshop, so got prolonged drying time right now. A little bit more glue in the hole there. Generous amount. And I'll wipe off the excess in a minute. Go ahead and get that in the hole. If you have to use a mallet, fine. Don't have to on mine. So I'm going to remove this plug here. You know, I put in that for the screw hole, to fill in the screw hole. I removed a couple of them already, the tips of them. I guess you could cut them really close, but I'm just using a little saw here. And Japanese saw. It's a sharp bugger. There, it's off. Then, I mean, you could take your orbital sander and sand it on down the rest of the way. Or you could just use a block like this. As far as the foam, I know that people online, they talk about gluing the foam to this base so it doesn't slide when you're putting the other on. I haven't found a need to do that. It stays pretty set. Plus in the future, if you're going to remove the pads, getting that adhesive foam off this is going to be kind of tough. These don't have to be exactly flat. This is actually on the bottom, so you're not going to be hitting it. And I kind of had it pressed down, clamped down when I slid them in there, so they should be even on the opposite sides. The pegs there to fill the screw holes. So again, these are just to have a substrate to screw into, or I don't have to keep screwing into the same hole in this cheap plywood. And so one more to cut off over here, and then we'll be moving on to the next stage. So for the next part here, I'm just gonna cut my foam. So, you know, I'd kind of measured ahead of time when I ordered the ultra high density foam online, and cutting it pretty close on that back edge, but I'm just using that flat edge and using a Sharpie to kind of mark it. I'm not undercutting it or overcutting it. I'm just cutting it to the same size. And that's just a rough line with the Sharpie. But again, I guess, you know, people want it to round off, and they talk about putting Dacron on top of this and get better round corners. But I found if you just kind of, when you put your leather on, if you compress it down when you do that, it rounds it off when it, but if you put it on just straight like this without compressing at all, it'd be very boxy, very square. I don't think you really want that. It doesn't look as nice as the rounded corners. But by putting pressure down on it, we'll get to that later. But right now I'm going to go cut this on the bandsaw. Again, you could use a knife, a long knife, or really big scissors, which I do have really huge scissors to do it. I don't think it's that terribly important. The bandsaw makes pretty quick work of this. Cuts pretty nice through there. For the dust cover, the same kind of thing. This is this real thin material. Also got this at Joann Fabrics. This one though, I'm going to actually, even though I'm drawing the outline here, I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter, or a little bit more narrow inside the line. So I don't really want it hanging over the edges where the leather is, even though that'll kind of set down in a rabbit in the chair. But I'm going to cut that maybe about this far inside. Still leave me plenty of room to staple it all along here. And I'm not going to overdo the staples on this like the person before me. I mean, maybe about 3 on each side, or 4. Make it easy to remove next time. This is kind of the chair and foam, and the undercover is not in that order. That's not the way they're going to go in. Again, I have a little inset in my chair that sits down in there. Makes it a little tighter. I guess if you're just sitting it on top, you have a little more room to play with, but I can't get too thick on the size of the vinyl and everything else. Making sure that fits back down in there. Shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to cut out the vinyl covering, and then I got my bottom here, because the way these are, they're stapled on the underside, so you want to push from, you know, the top on the back side. Put my foam down there, and then I just kind of took and kind of made sure that I had enough overlap here to staple to. And once I found about where that was, sliding it back and forth, I measured that. It was about 5.5 inches. So then I took that 5.5 inches and I measured a mark here, kind of keep parallel there and there, and put a couple spots like that and that, 5.5 inches out, and took my straight edge and ran it here. I'll do the same thing on the opposite side and the same thing on the top. Again, about 5.5 inch line going across, and then I'll cut that and get ready to staple it to the base. Just make sure you got a little bit, you know, some people will take it even all the way up to, you know, near here. That's fine. You could even take it over, it doesn't matter. I think this is plenty enough. So I tried a little something different this time. Instead of just pressing this down with my hand before I pull it up and staple it, I ran a board across and clamped it, and it was okay. I mean, I thought at first, yeah, you put one clamp on and the other. No, I just put them both on. It worked fine, and slowly lowered it down and compressed the foam. That'll give it more of a rounded appearance. I took this block and held it up there and drew a line on the back edge so I can tell how far down it's compressed on this side. So this is probably a little bit higher in the back right now because I don't think my board's right in the center here. So when I get around to the other side, I'll make sure it's the same, and on the other sides too, I'll try to compress it about the same. So next we're going to get to stapling. Okay, so I guess I probably should have cut this a little bit shorter now that I've compressed it down. It's a little close to this edge, but still within the wood at least. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in a few. They always say start from the center and go out, from the center and go out toward each side. I'm kind of stretching it a little bit here, but this first side doesn't matter as much stretching as the other side. I want to kind of keep it kind of flat and get. Corners are the tough part. There already. That's just pulling up on it. Oh yeah, oh, I'm supposed to draw my center line from here to here. Yeah, I need to do that. So let me grab a board there. So I got a little ahead of myself and started stapling before I drew the connecting line from the corners, which you don't want to cross over with your staples. And I actually put in a staple right in this area over that line. This other one's pretty darn close. So you want to stay, your initial staples, you want to stay on this side line for this edge and on the other side line for this edge when you're pulling them up and stapling them. And so it was okay, you know, we removed the staple. By now you're probably really good at removing staples after taking the initial pad off. So I just took a board here, you know, and just drew a line with the Sharpie there right across there, and on all four sides. Again, probably would be easier before you start putting this stuff on to do that, but avoid stapling past that side. So now I'm going to put a few more staples in just to make sure this side's, again, I'm not going to overdo it. I don't think you have to go crazy, but this does have some tension on it, so I'll probably want to put a few more than what I've got now. In the past, I just kind of pushed down to compress that foam so you get a more rounded edge on top, but this time I tried this clamp. The problem was the clamp was a little off center, and so this side was lower, this side was higher, and then when I went to move it over, this side popped back up. And now that I got on there, my question was, am I able to pull this tight enough to make sure there's nothing in there? And then to compress it now, I've got to take and hold my block up. Let's see, that's upright. And push it down to about there so we're even. So it's a little tricky. I'm not sure the clamp's necessarily the best way to go. I mean, you could eyeball it and just do it all around, but we'll see how it turns out. It's just a new way to try to get a little more even than just guessing by pushing down on the foam. But you definitely want to compress it some. Again, I think that leads to rounded over corners on the top versus very boxy looking. So hold this kind of tight. It looks like it's about on the line here. And so I'm going to go ahead and put some more staples in there as soon as I can reach the staple gun. Yeah, let me take this out. Alright, let's make sure again it's really tight here. About even, maybe a little bit more pressing down. Yeah, looks about even to the. There's probably better ways to do this. So basically, I put in staples by just tugging a lot on it and trying to keep it kind of tight in the corners, and I kind of ran, you know, some staples along each side here, right along the line there, here. You know, the question is how many. I'm sure there's a formula for spacing. I just figured I hadn't seen a single one pulled out on my previous chairs, so I'm thinking they don't pull out that easy. So And kind of the rounded part I was talking about is kind of this edge here that you want a little bit rounded, and that's, I compress the foam. Some people say put Dacron on there, which I've not tried. But if you just leave it without compressing it, it'll be very boxy, very square, and almost too high looking too. I probably could have compressed this further. And it's not, well, it's pretty close to even, but it's not exactly even. Again, I took the board the whole time around, make sure you put it up and down on there like I did, so I know which side's up, and with this line, everything below, that's kind of where I wanted it. So as I was pushing down with my hand and stapling, I was kind of holding the board and going around trying to keep the edges even. The clamp part didn't work so great, but first part I guess it helped a little bit. So it's got a little rounded appearance. I probably might have even compressed it more, it might have been good. Corners are going to be tricky. Again, I kind of ran along the line, try not to cross over the line that's inside here. That line, probably can't see it, there you go, that line right there. Try not to cross over that with your staples. So I ran some on either line. I think my other chairs I put a lot more in there. I think I'm doing less as I go. So next part, work on the corners, and there's a couple different options. One is kind of a folded corner where you kind of come up, and that's like this. Then cut out some material, pull a little straighter and flatter. So it's got kind of a crease like that. And then there's another kind of corner where you just kind of take it up like that, really hard. It's kind of a general guideline. And again, cut out all this material in here. I try to cut it out, just snip out pieces. There's different people tell you how to snip out some of the inside here if you're going to do the fold over method. So this method here might look a little better if you got to take and tuck it in on the sides. It's a little harder to do. I know there's a gentleman online that takes some kind of probe, it looks like a rounded part of the letter opener, and squeeze it in there to get that corner. This probably is a little easier, this kind of envelope corner or bed sheet corner to do. But again, if you cut out some of this extra material in here in this area as you go, I kind of before took pieces, don't want to cut out too much when you have enough for your corner. I think maybe I've done both ways corners. I think this way is a little easier, but maybe doesn't look quite as nice. So I'm going to take a second look at it and try it and decide. They just always do the front corners, which in this chair's the wider part is the front of the chair. Make sure that they get those the best, because the back ones will be kind of hidden from the back of the chair. So again, my longer side is my front corners. So I'll probably work on those first, put more time into cutting out the little pieces of material that are in my way. Just don't want to get too close down to here, down in here. But yeah, this whole part here could come out, a lot of that. If I'm going to staple that on there so I don't have too much excess, although you know that's not too bad. Have to tuck it up under there. Just kind of, you know, I've always wondered if stuff's going to catch up, food and stuff catch up under there. Just try to get it as tight as you can, then pulling it. But again, it'll take some tucking to do that. So for the corner, I just did one there. I decided to keep the front edge smooth and bring it around the side. And I just cut out a lot of extra material. And kind of, this next corner, I kind of took a Sharpie here, and I was kind of cutting out parts that I can, you know, that I can remove. I'm still not done. And I'm going to tuck it up like that kind of thing. So I don't know if you can see the angle there. There you go. So I've been removing parts from in here by just kind of drawing what I need and what I don't need. I'm kind of looking up here and pulling. And I had to put a little one close to the corner there to kind of keep it from wrinkling up in here. So, you know, I could almost do it here, but it's a little bit too much material to fit down in that rabbit groove. So I'm going to remove some more and mark off some more around here and cut it out and then staple it down. So on the back, well, actually the back of the chair, these corners, actually they were a little easier to do. I just kind of pulled, tugged, folded it under. I didn't even cut any material on these. I didn't think it was too much there to cause any problems, so I just left those and folded them and stretched them until I got, those aren't going to show because they're going to be in the back of the chair where the seat back is, at least. Front two kind of butchered that front corner one, but it's underneath. You always got to, in carpentry, it's always what you can see, what you can't see. A bit of a crinkle in there, you can see. So I'm not good at corners apparently. But again, once it's sitting in the chair and the inside the chair, it'll be okay. Just has to make sure that it fits in there, and then re-screw it through the bottom. So I finished the chair there. Got a little rounded over appearance on it. It's been screwed in from below. Just set it up on the workbench here and turn it upside down. Ran a long bit driver in there. Don't overscrew it, rip out the threads, but it's fine. It sucked the bottom down tight. So we're good to go. On the sides where you can see that corner crease there, the back ones are behind it. I kind of hid them back in there, back behind it. And ready to go.